Okay, good morning, everybody. We're here at Plug and Play, and we are starting the Digital Benefits Reinvented webinar. We're going to be discussing the digital benefits in the insurance space, which I want to also bring up our March 21st Employee Benefits First Focus Week event. It'll be here at Plug and Play in collaboration with our Enterprise 2.0 and Health verticals. So if you want more information on that, just send any of us an email. We'll give you all the information in the registration. So Hutch will be moderating and asking all these questions, and we'll be integrating all of our panelists into the conversation. I hope you guys enjoy, and feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A section on your screen, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you very much for the intro, and thank you everybody for coming in. So for those of you who are new, this is a new concept that we are starting here at Plug and Play InsurTech. We want to increase our thought leadership and more importantly, put brilliant founders on stage and in front of the many listeners out there who are eager to innovate and self-disrupt their business models. So we thank everybody for joining us. We do like to keep these conversations a bit informal and natural. The goal really here is to start thinking the way entrepreneurs and founders think and understand the way they solve problems. And with that, we don't want this to be a formalized sales pitch. This is a conversation that's really focusing on creating impact in the industry. Now, today we're going to cover a number of different areas, particularly around group benefits and expanded product offering. But this is just one section that we cover in the InsurTech program here at Plug and Play. For those of you who are new to Plug and Play in general, today we kind of consider ourselves the world's largest corporate innovation platform. That's made up of a number of different business units, from venture capital to running technology accelerators and events and other things. And the real goal here is to figure out how can we do a better job scouring the globe for brilliant entrepreneurs? How can we provide them more resources to scale their businesses and really create impact? And how can we help corporations around the world quickly identify their future partners, and whether that's investments or partnerships or any type of strategic initiative between a startup and a corporation? We want to be here to help fuel that, to help narrow down the right partners, and to help really alleviate the stress points that come in with two very different worlds clashing at a very accelerated pace today. So thank you again for everybody who's coming. This is sponsored by the InsurTech program here at Plug and Play. And a special thank you to all of our panelists, all of whom I consider friends and all of whom I've had fascinating conversations with. So we're excited to share that with the rest of our audience today. All right. Now, to kick things off, we'd like to introduce the people on the panel we have here today. It's a multitude of different startup companies and founders. We have Greg from Surify, Jason from Limelight, Robert, who's a very, very insightful thought leader on all things insurance, but particularly today on group benefits, and David from Peanut Butter, who's a startup company that recently has been performing very well in our last batch of startup companies. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our participants today. I'd love to hear you guys introduce yourselves and maybe a couple of lines about what it is that your business does and how you're impacting the group benefits division. We'll start with you, Greg.
Hello, everyone. Greg Yoder. I'm the head of business development at a company called Surify here in Silicon Valley. I actually have a 35-year career in the employee benefits and employee benefits software business, and I retired from that and pivoted to Surify. And what Surify does is, the best way to describe it is, we help insurance companies connect with their customers digitally in a way they haven't been able to do in the past. And we primarily work in the life and annuity world, but of course, most of those companies are in the benefits world, and we're bringing our products down to that area as well.
Thank you very much, Greg. For those of you guys who are listening in, if you don't know Greg, I'm very surprised. He's one of the most well-networked people I've met in the insurance industry, and quite a veteran around Plug and Play. So thank you very much. We consider him a family member. Surify was actually our very first investment as the Plug and Play InsurTech program. And he's actually pushed us a few great employees as well. So, thank you, Greg, for being here from day one. Also, another longtime veteran of the program here, Jason. Would love to have you introduce yourself.
You bet. Thanks for having me. And Hutch, in the introduction, you said a couple of times you bringing brilliant founders on. We've got 3 teenage boys. They'd say I'm probably marginally intelligent from their perspective. The accolades. Been in the benefits industry for a little bit less than Mr. Yoder, for about 20 years here in the Valley. Although, to your point, not only is Greg known all the places we work together and cross paths there, I was in New York a number of years ago in a bathroom, and there's a ad, and it has Greg Yoder, which is like there was ads all over the place. I couldn't get away from Greg. Wherever I went, there it was. And so I think we talked about that at one point. So thanks for having me. So Limelight Health, we started about 5 years ago. We've raised about $45 million to date. We just closed the Series C, which we're pretty excited about. And we're helping insurance carriers in the group space, mostly medical, dental, vision, life, disability, and voluntary products with digital transformation and thinking about better ways to do quoting, rating, and underwriting. And love the benefits industry. Very exciting time to be in the space, not only with the money flowing into it, but also I think just the transformation that's going on. It's been a long time coming. Typically, it lags way behind property and casualty, and certainly life and personal lines. But couldn't be more excited to be part of kind of everything that's taking place.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Sorry we had to steal you away from your boys today, but thanks for taking the time. We do love seeing the family in the office. And you're right, it's a very different expectations when managing Series C investors and 3 kids who want a sandwich. But I think it makes a nice transition on to peanut butter over here. And David, if you'd like to spend some time introducing yourself, I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Hutch. And greetings, everyone from Chicago. Dave Aronson, CEO of Peanut Butter. We help employers attract, retain, and engage college-educated talent by administering student loan assistance programs. So for companies like Rabobank, Ceridian, Bridgepoint Education, and others who are looking for great people, we equip their team members not only with the resources they need to manage student debt, but we facilitate contributions directly from the employer toward the employee's loans. The net result is that people are more likely to accept job offers and they stick around longer.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming. And on next to Robert, a very interesting firm, Navarca research firm. They study all things insurance and are phenomenal thought leaders in the space. Robert has sent me a number of reports on group benefits over the last couple months, which has helped me kind of prepare for this. So very excited to hear from you, Robert.
Well, great, and thanks for having us. It's great to be with you this afternoon. So I'm calling in from Raleigh, North Carolina, so RTP, the opposite side of the country from Silicon Valley. Navarca is a technology research and advisory firm that is focused on the insurance industry exclusively and North America as a market only. So all things group benefits, voluntary benefits, as well as life and annuity and property and casualty related is part of our bailiwick. Among other things, we manage a research council, which today includes 350 North American carriers. It's a hub and spoke networking model. Carriers, as you probably know, are somewhat reluctant to share information with each other. Competitive concerns and having things taken out of context being 2 of the things that are issues for them, as well as just being a highly regulated space. So direct conversations tend to not lead to great insights, but with this hub and spoke model where we're at the hub and all of the conversations are anonymized and all the information is confidential, it's sometimes shocking just how much information is shared, which then is ported into many of the research reports that we produce, some of which Hutch was mentioning. We also have more than 120 North American carriers that are advisory clients, which basically we think of as strategy as a service, where they have contracted with us, not unlike what you might find with a law firm, where there is a retainer fee. And they bring us into strategic conversations, vendor selection decisions, business development efforts on their end to really help position themselves for what is a very changing market. And of course, it is a very changing market, with the benefit space being one of the things that is very clearly going through some pretty significant transformations now. My own background is a little hard to believe, but I started in this industry 4 decades ago in the benefit space, have been a senior leader in organizations like Prudential, where I ran the original e-business development group, Guardian Insurance, where I was the divisional CIO responsible for all retail investment products, Nationwide Insurance, where I ran their business transformation office. and was also a CIO for a top 50 U.S. bank. I've been at Novarica now for 7 years and run our life and annuity and benefits practice. So great to be with you all this afternoon.
So Robert, you get the torch today. You have the longest tenure here of all of us.
That's true, yes. I'm a little embarrassed about that sometimes, although it's interesting because some of the things when I started in the benefit space, we were going through a really significant transformation, introducing significant changes in technology and some notable change management issues / problems, which is what got a rising sophomore in college hired into a company like Prudential. And so much of the excitement we're going through now actually looks an awful lot like that, just with different technology and some different business problems.
Yeah.
And probably the same legacy systems.
Well, some of those systems I helped implement.
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing your expertise to the panel here. And then for the startups and those who are listening, Novarica does a phenomenal job of writing research reports where they'll oftentimes interview our startups and quote them and feature them in their research. It's a great platform to really spread the ideas. So thank you for everything you guys are doing to contribute to the whole movement that's going on right now. All right. Well, to kick things off, we'll get started with some of the questions, and thank you guys again for keeping it light. Don't obviously feel like you have to uncover anything secret. This is something that by no means has to be IP or anything that you guys are uncomfortable sharing. But I think there's a lot of areas that we can cover, and I think you guys speak very well to kind of everything that's going on in the division. But of course, we would love to hear about how you guys are personally improving the industry with your business models and some of the learnings you've had from that process. So to get started, I believe to properly cover the trends that are happening in the group benefits world today, we first need to start thinking about what the problems are. I think oftentimes entrepreneurs who are looking at addressing the insurance industry, so many of today's tech talent just don't understand insurance and what the problems are and how they could solve them. And I think a lot of the people who do understand the problems of insurance are well equipped in the insurance understanding, but not as much experience in leveraging today's cutting edge technologies to address those problems. So keeping that in mind, where are you guys seeing the largest inefficiencies in the group benefit space, and what areas do you think are the ripest for disruption? And here we're going to start with Jason from Limelight.
I think my thought is that there are problems everywhere in the benefits industry, and that's a good thing for entrepreneurs. And I'm not just saying that to kind of be facetious. I think that if you look at many reports that folks have done, it's certainly one of the most lagging industries remaining. I know Kleiner Perkins did a report probably 4 or 5 years ago that talked about just every industry that there is and kind of where they're at and their technology development and insurance kind of broader was the one that typically had the worst NPS scores, had the lowest adoption of technology, and was the ripest for innovation. And I think if you then kind of break insurance down from property casualty, as I said earlier, and then personal lines, benefits is typically always lagging. And so where you might have things in property casualty, you see all kinds of stuff taking place with, AI and chatbots, which is a hot topic, or when you're looking at blockchain or all these type of things, then benefits is going to be 5-10 years behind. That might be a little bit, I don't know what others think, but so the good news is that there's tons and tons of opportunity for improving all kinds of areas. So I have some other thoughts around the time that it takes, but I also think that the other secondary challenge to it is that a lot of folks talk about disrupting industries, and sometimes folks come in without any domain experience. And I would say that even with a team that's got substantial domain experience, we constantly run up against the challenge of getting really smart, very talented people in that don't know the industry. And there's a substantial curve they have. I would say probably 6 to 9 months just to get them up to speed to really kind of navigate the nuances that are very specific to the benefits industry. And so it's a good problem to have and lots of opportunity, but takes, I think, a lot longer than most folks understand than in many industries.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. And it's interesting. There is that massive problem of, employment, HR, hiring, retraining, retaining employees in the insurance industry specifically. And, group benefits being so closely tied to that does create an interesting platform for cross collaboration there. Greg, I would love to hear, what are the areas that you're finding a lot of the pain points? I mean, somebody who's been deeply involved in this industry for many years, what has been creating the most friction for you?
Well, my comment is really that the employers, when we talk about benefits, we're really talking about employer paid benefits, not necessarily individual. And I just think one of the biggest problems is that employers have this ever increasing cost connected to their health insurance programs and their dental insurance programs. And the problem, from my perspective, is that they have not been making the investment, if you will, in the digitization of serving their employees because they just have so much price pressure on their benefits. And so it's basically no entity in the world should care more about the health and the well-being of their people than the employer and the insurance companies. And in both cases, in a general sense, they're not making investments in this area. And there's just great opportunities to help their employees live longer, live better, and have less claims. But the problem is they just have not been making investments in this area.
Wonderful. Well, looking more at expanding the product offering, David, curious to hear your thoughts on what you've learned so far, kind of looking to expand the offering in this industry.
Yeah, I think what we see in employee benefits is the people at corporations who are responsible for engaging talent are fewer and fewer. So America's HR departments are overtasked and understaffed. And in order for our benefit solutions to be successful, they have to be incredibly efficient. So the approach that we've taken with our solution is to always make life incredibly easy for the HR team, increasingly a smaller HR team. We do that by having a platform that is installed in an hour and takes less than a half hour a month to administer. I think that the solution, the pain point that we're solving with student debt is one that will lead to other opportunities for employers. There's been an opportunity for employers to use student debt for a long time to motivate their team members, either accept job offers or to keep people on board longer, but there hasn't been an efficient solution. I think there are going to emerge other arbitrage opportunities in the perceived value of benefits where employers, when they can do it efficiently, have an opportunity to deploy new benefits to engage their teams.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I had a nice chat with Robert about this a couple months ago, discussing the problems of waterfall, development cycles in insurance companies. And one of the big areas for that was the HR division. And as Robert was explaining, was that, that slow decision-making process, by the time they're finally getting, an offer out to somebody, 10 companies had already sent them offers and they'd already picked someone, and small things. I mean, everything from just the actual management cycles to the offering itself, are way behind, and anything you can do to really improve that is impactful for the insurance industry themselves and for those who are there insuring. Absolutely. And Robert, I know that you've had a lot of experience on the infrastructure side. We've talked about this deeply in the past. Would love to hear, and I'm sure you already had something prepared, so feel free to talk about it however you would like, but would also love to hear your thoughts on the infrastructure side of group benefits and, how much is being tied up there and where you're seeing, well, at the end of the day, your legacy system is going to cause a certain amount of friction no matter what. How much friction is actually coming from this, and what are the workarounds that you've come up with?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, Hutch, and it does tie back a little bit to what Jason was mentioning. So two things I'd like to frame. One is that as you think about technology, innovation, and adoption in financial services, so a bigger umbrella than just benefits or even insurance, one of the things that's very clear is that technology, innovation, and adoption is very much tied to the frequency of transaction activity and the degree to which you have the ability to migrate from one provider to another. So retail banking, for instance, is the space where technology innovation always takes place first, because you've got very low switching costs, very high transaction volumes, and it's actually quite easy to move from one place to another with no financial burden on the individuals involved. Typically a 5-year echo before you see those same things emerge in insurance, always in personal lines, property and casualty insurance first, because you've got low switching costs, high transaction volumes, and basically no secrets. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. 5 more years to get to the life and annuity space, and then as Jason said, the group benefits and voluntary benefits piece tends to be a laggard even to that. So thinking about that as a framework for how the market has historically worked is very helpful. There's another element, though, when you look at the benefit space that's important, since you raised the issue of infrastructure, and that is that for many companies that are providing the benefits today, so the insurance carriers that are the plan providers, they themselves are actually a result of regulatory reform in the healthcare space that took place in the 1990s. And it's a little hard to remember that, but what really happened was healthcare companies went one way, and the surviving group life, disability, and voluntary benefits companies went a different way. So you've got 2 different sets of legacy infrastructure. On the health side, it's not uncommon to find very old technologies that are pretty rigid, pretty inflexible, but also dealing with liability tails that are relatively long for the products. And on the group life and DI side, it's frequently state-of-the-art 1990s technology, so it's not that legacy, but it is actually in some ways harder and more risky to deal with because it's relatively poorly documented. It's challenging for people to manipulate those things, and the margins for the companies that are running those platforms actually can be pretty thin. So back to the comment about investment, it can be a place that companies approach investing in very carefully, and they basically stopped investing during the Great Recession. So there's a bit of technology debt that's been built up over time. And the market's begun to pivot. So you have a series of things that companies need to be mindful of. The fact that there is this technology debt out there, but varies by type of product or by line of business. You certainly have benefits changing and more interest in the creation of voluntary benefits types of capabilities that can offload some of the responsibility to employees or plan participants, but can also change the nature of the benefits themselves. The conversation around student debt, for instance, or different types of products that are in demand amongst millennials and soon Gen Z generational participants are very different than what you see as being important and top of mind to baby boomers and older Gen Xers. So what it's meant is a very complex environment that carriers are having to deal with, changes in how they think about their ability to access the plan members themselves, and those rules that are built into many of the contracts that are in place today actually vary by product in terms of what someone on the carrier side is able to do. So it does mean that it is a very interesting space. It is one that, as several other panelists mentioned, I think is ripe and prime for people to do things that are different. But it's also one where there is, because of the long-term nature of the contracts turning into long-term liability tails, a fair amount of headwind that companies are going to face. So it's very important to start to pick and choose the pieces of the market that one wants to go after and look for opportunities that may be there that are being simply missed by others in the market, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
This is Greg. I would like to add just a few little facts to those comments. Number one, we've been learning that a lot of the governmental entities around the world, around the United States, are stopping allowing payroll deduction slots for a lot of the voluntary benefits. It's just become overwhelming to them. And that is really going to be problematic, or is problematic and challenging for the worksite marketing companies, and a lot of insurance companies in the U.S. are in that business. Very challenging. And secondarily, when we talk about employee benefits, everyone, we need to remember that the term benefits, there's large company benefits, as in think of companies over 100 people, small company benefits under 100. And then with our gig economy, we have more and more people that are no longer covered under your typical group life and disability programs. And that's just with Obamacare and with guaranteed issue insurance, that's put a lot of pressure on the insurance companies, because before they used to have large groups of people and they could turn down individuals that made application in the individual side, but they can't do that anymore. And so I would make a comment that the large companies have been making decent investments in digital benefits and servicing and taking care of their employees, but it's been very difficult in the small group benefits and in particular with individuals in the gig economy, with all the people with individual insurance. The insurance companies are really challenged because it's very expensive to engage and I say monitor and engage and try to affect those people to make good health choices, et cetera.
Well, so two things I would add to Greg's comment. I think that benefits discussion is actually a really important one, and there are different flavors of benefits. And so if you put yourself into the position of the human resources department, which, as we were talking about, frequently is thin and stretched, they're thinking about not only the things that we're talking about here, health benefits, group life benefits, disability products, potentially voluntary benefits and worksite, but they're also thinking about retirement benefits. And so there is a bleed over into just exactly how you're going to deal with things like defined contribution retirement plans. And so one of the things to be thoughtful about is where are there parallels between the retirement services space and what we have been more narrowly focused on here in terms of group health and life and related benefits. But I think the point about the size of the employer or the plan sponsor is absolutely critical. One of my experiences over and over again working inside carriers is that the technology you need to be able to support the national accounts or the large employers turns out to be very different than what you might think about for the small employer market, in part because you've got wildly different sets of capabilities on the buy side. So what you're integrating with may in one case be a full functioned payroll platform like an ADP, and on the other hand, it may be Billy Bob or Mary Sue running the accounting off the side of their desk, and everything happens, if you're lucky, on spreadsheets. That's right.
And even within an ADP, it's a great example. And to both, I think Greg's comment and what you're saying, Robert, even within those, then you have, large group, small group, and within them there's multiple systems. And so it may be that wherein you're connecting to ADP's payroll, that may not connect to their benefits, or it may not connect to their retirement even there. And you can duplicate that across, carriers and so forth, right? So it's a fun, complexing challenge to solve these things. Yes.
Well, and Hutch, back to your original question, I would argue that one of the greatest challenges that we face in this space is the difficulty of managing the movement of data back and forth between the various participants in the ecosystem, the lack of standards that exist, the lack of standards that will continue to exist just based on the number of players in our view. And there may well be some significant opportunities going forward to apply some leading edge or bleeding edge technologies to try and figure out better ways to interrogate that data, normalize it, and position it to be consumed across the ecosystem.
Yeah, I agree on all fronts. I think the blaring elephant in the room in every situation, every product line, every use case always comes back down to legacy systems, specifically around CRM data, employee data, getting that into a place that can be worked around with. And yeah, I mean, if you figure that out, you now open the door to every single product line or division of your company, the whole new multitude of options. One of the things that I hear a lot, and we've had a deep discussion now on some of the problems that we're facing, but rarely, and then even when you guys are building your companies, which is all customer facing, it's very, very oriented on the consumer, still the conversation steeps away and keeps falling back into, the corporate side, the processes that are going on. And at the end of the day, you know, we're seeing this continuously across all product lines. The consumer or the end insured user tends to be at the end of that conversation or not at the very forefront. This is where startup companies are particularly well equipped. You know, they're very focused on solving a problem, and typically they're aligned very closely with the problem the end users are having, and they're very focused on solving that problem. And so in this whole startup enabled world, you know, we're seeing carriers and all enterprises become much more closely aligned with the end consumer with custom products and more data on how to serve them. This is still just beginning to happen in the insurance industry, and it still seems like we're leagues away from this in the group benefits division. So in your guys' opinions, you know, how are you guys seeing the carrier get more deeply integrated with the end consumer through services, apps, and things like that? And have you seen any interesting examples of this happening right now? And the last thing I'll mention here, we look at customer experience in every other way, and every way imaginable, right? It's not just the chatbot, but it's also, you know, getting throughput on the system or binding a policy quickly or simple engagements, right? Just about every component of that business ends up being customer engagement in one way or another. So how are you guys seeing carriers and corporations, and how are your businesses looking to improve that connection? I would love to start with David on this one.
Yeah, this is at the heart of everything that we do. Is over the last 15 years, student debt has outpaced disposable income by 5 times. What's interesting about that is that most of the people who run businesses today graduated college well before 2003. So they don't understand the plight of the student debt holder. And that's what we're bringing to light for corporations is how burdensome is it to hold student loans? What do the people who have student loans need? We provide employers with 2 levels of service. One is called student loan resources, where employees get access to all the tools they need to manage their student debt. We created it because 70% of people with student loans don't know how to find out if they could pay less. And the second is student loan repayment, where the company contributes toward the employee's loans. So we focus on the employees and their needs, identifying a challenge that they had, and then what a number of the other panelists have covered is just making it easy for the employer so that they can strengthen the bond that they have between their employees. And I think you're right. It's about having the heart of the consumer, the end user, the employee, in our case, the borrower, at the core of what we're doing.
Absolutely. And Greg, you're very obviously customer centric in your platform. And what are the approaches you guys are taking, and what are you seeing gain traction?
Well, first I'll just make a comment that, you know, when the audience that might be listening to the webinar today, they're employers and they're insurance companies and they're insurtechs as well. So there's a different answer, opinion for each one of them. But my comment is this, is that as a general rule, the insurance company has no relationship with the people that they're insured. In large group life and disability programs, though the comment was made earlier about the long tail exposure, it's absolutely huge when you have, you know, hundreds and millions of people that have long-term disability coverage that's going to pay them 60 to 70% of their salary at age 70, yet the insurance companies in most cases don't even know who the people are. They don't even know their name in the very large group world. And they have no ability to affect the health and the well-being of those people to basically suppress, if you will, or help them with their morbidity and their mortality. In other words, living well, living long, living healthy. And that is one area that companies like ours, Surify, what we bring to insurance companies and employers. And you also have the likes of DACADO, Life.io, the corporate wellness programs. It's strange when we're talking about benefits. What we're really talking about is a bunch of money being spent, not only to recruit and retain people, but to keep them personally healthy, physically and financially. And the tools in that area are, I think, going to pay the biggest dividend to society. And that is a code that we are trying to crack, whether it's in a large employer group or down on the individual basis.
Absolutely. Jason, you look like you're ready to talk.
Well, yeah, no, I was going to say it's, you know, similar to what Greg and I think Robert is saying. It's fairly complex. I love what, you know, in terms of what David is saying that, you know, Peter is doing. But if you take these things in kind of the stages and also kind of the transactionals, you know, Peanut Butter's got a brilliant new idea of something that brokers or no one else have ever sold. It's helping folks deal with a big problem around student debt, right? It's brilliant. And you can plug into payroll, and I don't know the technology and everything, but like that's something that you say consumers are going to benefit from immediately. And so if there are more ideas around that, but from my lens, you know, we're selling in the group medical, dental, vision, life space, which 80+% of the distribution there in small and large group is through brokers. And my view has been, contrary to I think a lot of popular belief, I don't think brokers are going to go anywhere. And in fact, if you look at the investments in benefits, because it's complex, you're dealing with emotions, and it's not like something that people are comfortable with, and it's got tax consequences, and there's all kinds of, you know, nuances there. But if you look at the top 10 investments over the last several years in InsurTech, I think 6 to 8 of them are brokers. Now they're promoting themselves as a new, innovative, disruptive technology. Zenefits is one of them. What Zenefits did that was brilliant was they learned how they marketed. I mean, for all the stuff that people get on them about and all the compliance issues they ran into, they built a brokerage book of business. So much so their pivot was, we're selling that to digital because we want to get out of the brokerage business, and we want to actually try and be a technology company. And it'll be very interesting to see if that sticks, because it's hard to scale a technology company in group benefits. Partially, my argument there is that the pipes still aren't built. And so most companies have to spend so much time just doing development work because you can't focus on the UI UX based on the fact that the pipes aren't laid yet. And
Absolutely.
so a lot of people are going to get, you know, bloody noses. It's like Lord of the Rings. I watched a trilogy with my kids this weekend. And so the ring is like the benefits, man. Everybody's like, ooh, this is sexy. I want the ring. And yet Mordor wants to kill everyone who gets in the ring. So it's, you know, I think you look at all these and it's like they're sexy companies that are really brokers. And the cool thing is, if you want to be a brokerage firm and put a new kind of lipstick on, there's $80 billion of small group commissions available. You can build a massive business. There's room for 20 more Zenefits easily. So anyway, that's my thought. But we're doing a lot of work, I think, to help try and build some of the pipes. Takes a little bit longer, and that ultimately we believe will benefit the end user, the consumer, as some of that gets kind of set up and there's more infrastructure in place. But
100%. I agree with you on a number of fronts. And then Robert, I'm going to jump to the next question because we're on time, but I want you to answer this one first.
Sure.
Because I think it's super relevant, and I think it all does end up coming back to customer service. I love that we're talking about the Zenefits model. I think that was definitely kind of like the lightning rod that attracted a lot of people to the space. The opportunities are there and opened up, oh wow, there's actually, you know, some validity to a very different approach to this kind of concept here. And if anything, it really changed the way people were approaching the problem. Zenefits, for those who haven't, are not as familiar, you know, we really took a concept of commoditized software like HR software, that's, you know, pretty rule-based and pretty rigid in what you need to do with your requirements, and offering that to small businesses as a way to extract data for then selling benefits packages. Right? It's a very clever way. It's the kind of the classic Silicon Valley model of, let's provide some sort of service for little to no cost in exchange for data, and then we'll find another creative way to monetize that data. It also speaks to the growing trends of platforms, right? And we've talked on this a number of different times, kind of Robert specifically saying earlier, you know, what is the day-to-day role of somebody in the HR department that is making these benefits decisions, and how can we alleviate some of those stress points or find other value-added services that when bundled together is a more attractive value proposition for those who are our end customers. The data collection is wonderful, and driving down the cost per acquisition is really the biggest differentiator you can find in a highly commoditized insurance market today. So kind of running off that concept, really focusing on the platform-tized approach and the benefits that kind of come from the platforms. What have you guys seen personally? How have you guys learned and adapted your business models in the wake of the benefits, both the positives and the negatives. And what do you guys think are the advantages of kind of like this platform-tized approach, which then has many other solutions like the ability to bolt on things like a peanut butter, or things like, you know, other types of services and value-added products. So Robert, I know you've covered this deeply. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, I think it's a fascinating space, right? And I think there are some lessons, both positive and negative, that can be learned from it. The idea of creating more compelling user experiences and putting yourself in a position where you can gain access to data that can do things like create the opportunity to share next best offers, or to do things which conceivably could help people live better, healthier physical lives or financial lives. There's a compelling logic in some of that. On the other hand, as Zenefits learned, this is a highly regulated industry, which varies significantly from state to state. And unlike banking, and unlike many other industries in this country, this is one that is regulated at the state level. And for the purposes of those regulations, we have 57 different jurisdictions that people need to be aware of. So I think part of the lesson is, can you do things? And the answer is yes. Are there platform opportunities? Clearly there are. And I would actually point at Fidelity Investments as a company that has done a really good job of creating a marketplace that brings together both the retirement services and the group life and DI and the voluntary benefits into their marketplace, but doing it in a way that hasn't created any regulatory heartache or pain. But I think it also highlights the fact that, as the prior conversation illustrated, you have in the benefit space different points where you have different contacts with people or personas that are in the ecosystem. And thinking about how you're going to apply technology so that it is appropriate to gain value for the people at that point in time is pretty critical. So the point earlier about you don't even know who people are, well, that's pretty significant, right? If you look at the group life side, you don't really know who people are until there's a claim. And the claim on the group life side, you hope you only have one. It's kind of a once and done business. On the other hand, when you get to, when you get to the disability business, it's a high frequency transaction business. And so I would actually point at the Hartford Insurance Group as a company that recognized that while they didn't know people on the life side, they absolutely did on the DI, the disability side. And so they've created some very interesting and compelling offerings that are health insurance-like in terms of helping people work their way through the claims process initially, but also getting back to the normal activities of life. So back to what Jason was saying, it's complex, and it really rewards organizations that understand the complexity and are able to solve specific problems within those spaces. And as he said, and I think is absolutely true, these benefits turn out to be very complicated themselves. And so the role of the broker doesn't necessarily go away, but I think it does fundamentally change going forward, where brokers, the human beings involved, will be able to handle far bigger books of business. There will be things that people, whether they're HR professionals or plan participants, should be able to do that are self-service based. And the brokers and others that are professionals will be in a position where they can take those high skills and apply them against really complex issues, which, by the way, is really important, because if you look in the United States today, the average age of a producer across all lines of business, so this isn't just a benefits comment, but it is across all lines of business in the insurance world, the producer today is 59 and a half. So 59 and a half isn't old, but as an average, that's a stunning number. And so we're going to have technology solutions, because those people who are ramping up to retire over the next 5 years probably are not going to be replaced. And when I say probably, they're definitely not going to be replaced one for one in the labor pool. So technology is going to have to be a critical role here to get better efficiency.
Absolutely.
They're all about 12 years older than Greg Yoder.
And they seem to be moving in opposite directions.
Yeah, you know, I do have a comment relative to Robert's comments on the complexity etc. It's a question, actually. Beyond medical insurance, say that there's a lot of complexity in the dental, disability, life, worksite marketing stuff, payroll systems, etc. I feel, and again, I spent 35 years doing this, and I just feel that everything is can be almost commoditized, if you will, other than the complexity of the health insurance in those 57 districts or 57 jurisdictions we were talking about. And I just was wanting to respond to that.
Sure. Yeah, fully. The 57 jurisdiction thing applies to virtually all products. So it's even things that seem relatively simple, like vision, dental. I think part of the complexity they face is that the products themselves may be different from state to state, right? You have certain states that are very aggressive about things from a regulatory standpoint that they do, California being one, and maybe most famously New York being the other. And then there are other states that just do things that I would describe as being, well, odd. You know, Oregon, for instance, was one that when I was dealing with was just a difficult state. Nice people, but a different sense of how they were going to regulate their environment. So there is the product complexity that is part of that. But I think one of the other things is you've got a complexity in terms of the hierarchy of relationships. And so, for instance, one example of this is when you get to group benefits, and this doesn't actually matter if it's life, health, or retirement plans, the plan sponsor, so the employer or the association, frequently takes the view that they're my employees, and even if you happen to know who they are, I don't want you to talk to them without my permission. Right. And so you wind up with every plan you have may have a different set of rules about who can talk to whom about what. And you can't even really mix data together. So, you know, for instance, when I was at Prudential, we could not mix Rob McIsaac, the individual life insurance holder, with Rob McIsaac with the exact same Social Security number as a 401k plan participant, because it crossed over some of these rules, not regulatory rules, but employer-based rules about what you could do with that information. It makes corporate marketing people crazy, but it also has led companies into really significant challenges when they chose to just try and ignore those rules. And once again, I would actually point at Fidelity Investments as being a company, a large company, which has done a really interesting and creative job of not skirting the rules, but about enabling the employees, the plan participants, to put things together themselves in ways that create a more compelling user experience. But it's that opting in process that you have to go through on that side, which gets rid of some of that complexity. So the complexity actually is regulatory, yes. It's the products themselves, yes. And then it's how you layer in the employers who vary significantly based on the size. So that's part of the comment. Does that make sense, Greg?
Sure.
So can I ask a question to your question, Greg, or just a comment, Hutch? Is that all right? So, you know, I'm wondering your thoughts, Greg, on the same topic. And I guess, you know, my thinking around the complexity is everything that Robert just said, but would add to that, and this is what I think, and so I'm wondering, you know, your thoughts. Also, having sold benefits for many years, there's a part counseling to it, meaning if you think about medical, it's like we all think as a triage, I need medical insurance, at least most of the time. And then, you know, the ACA made it more of a requirement. But then dental, vision, life, and life specifically, a lot of times, unless an employer offers it, many people don't want to talk about death and life insurance and estate planning. And then you go down to the next level, disability. Tons of people don't want to like talk about disability on an emotional level. And then forget getting to cancer and critical illness, right? So there's a whole age-old question of, are benefits sold or do people buy them? And how does technology enable that more as well? So I'd love your thoughts, Greg, there too, right? Because you've sold benefits for years, but I think there's the technical complexity of just, you know, the infrastructure. And then there's the how people engage with these products. Then you add on what Peanut Butter, what you guys are doing, David, right? In terms of now you're talking about debt, and then there's all kinds of emotions around debt and financial planning. And so this is it's addition to the technology, there's the whole behavior and human component to it, right?
Well, this webinar isn't long enough for me to answer that question.
Sure.
But I will tell you this, and again, I did spend 35 years as an employee benefits consultant, retirement plan. I own an HR consulting company. I mean, I've danced in all the spaces we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, and again, now I have given up my insurance and securities license now just because I had done that long enough. But I actually don't know and don't believe that an agent or the agent's staff is absolutely critical and sometimes even warranted when it goes to servicing the consumer. In other words, there's nothing a broker can say or do. There's nothing their staff can say or do in assisting that company other than we have to make the insurance company pay the claim or adjudicate anything according to the contract. And so I actually believe it's a lot more commoditized, if you will. And the people that really are responsible at this point are the insurance companies. And we get paid to help people buy insurance, and we're in the middle, and we've got paid very, very well. But I think one of the biggest challenges is that the insurance companies who basically are on risk, are processing claims, their teams don't, they underserve the people that they insure. And that creates a vacuum, and that brokers have been filling. But I had a staff of 22 people. And I was the one salesperson, and they spent a lot of time helping people. But when it was all said and done, we could not make an insurance company do anything other than pay according to their contract. So anyway, that's just
yeah. No, it's I know we're almost out of time. So, but I think it's that piece of it, right? And I it's interesting because I also have been a benefits consultant, but I'm on the idea and the side that I think that I absolutely think people are still going to have a huge role. Mostly if I compare it to my taxes. I love TurboTax. I used it 20 years ago when I had one 1040 form to do. But at this point in life, I want to talk to somebody who knows their stuff around taxes because it's a lot more complex with 3 kids and a wife and business and all that. And I think that a lot of areas of benefits are the same, wherein technology can enable the more strategic things that are needed, but that, be interesting to see if you're right. Of, hey, maybe machines will take over and there will be no folks in distribution and do a great job, right? But I find that one hard to believe.
And I think this also does feed well, David, kind of coming in from the angle of, value-added services. So, if we're having trouble getting data, the age-old tale of Silicon Valley is like, if I can find a way to get that data, it has to be through some sort of value exchange, or we're talking about complexity in products. Well, adding new products is only going to increase that complexity and figure things out. So, and you also have the whole financial institution element of, there's a whole nother layer of complexity to it. So how are you guys approaching this, integrating the platforms that are out there that are using for distribution? What has really been the key element for you guys?
Yeah, I think the key is empathy. And I go back to something that Jason said about people not wanting to talk about death, not wanting to talk about disability, not wanting to talk about critical illness and hospital indemnity. I think there are solutions that will emerge by showing empathy, whether it's from a plan sponsor or technology, that will help enable those conversations in the future. And I'll give you an example of how we do that. With our student loan assistance programs, the company is often making a contribution toward employee student loans. We've had a number of employees call our call center and say, I'm 45 years old. I'm embarrassed to have student debt, but this has made it something that I'm ready to tackle. And I would say it's in big part due to the fact that the company is contributing. So there's a nice nudge there. But I think it's kind of also in part to the fact that we have a funny name. We created peanut butter because most people can't afford. Most people when they're in college, peanut butter is the only thing they can afford to eat. The only thing they can afford to eat. So we have a simple way that makes it easy, that helps people, and we're fortunate to work with employers that are providing a nudge forward. And I think that level of empathy will have an impact in the future on the ability for companies and technology to sell additional benefit products.
I couldn't agree more. I think it speaks so well to a lot of the growing trends. We have increase in college tuition. We have low, decrease in colleges getting jobs. We have high churn for millennials in corporations, and it's hard to make them stay. And you know, there's also the whole level of like, we should have ethics behind these things. We should have morals. There's just something that, you know, doesn't just have to be a bottom line initiative, which it's proven that it is, but also there's all these other elements to this. And I think kind of, you know, especially after the wake of Lemonade, kind of having the social conscious business model in the insurance industry is very appealing, especially when it's talking about problems like risk, which financial debt is, right? In the context of, hey, like, we're here to cover you and your risk and your stress points. Like, this is an increasingly large problem that has to be dealt with. And the solution to this problem can be subsidized through other players who have ancillary revenue opportunities off of it. And really kind of coming in it from the platform-type approach, expanding these value opportunities. I mean, you know, these businesses and these small startup companies or billion-dollar companies 5 years later, I mean, they need efficient, fast, and attract people. And a traditional benefits package is not going to bring in the talent they need to scale that business. And so I really think there's so much opportunity in those value-added services. And I think, you know, and this is something that we believe all together on the insurance team here at Plug and Play, is that the insurance industry has to move to a more service-oriented industry, value-added services, other opportunities. And there's so much space here to share in distribution and to share in deployment and data and revenue that it's kind of a no-brainer. So much so that the insurance industry has always operated, you know, through partners, you know, through distribution partners, you know, claims partners, you know, lawyers, everything else. It just has a different technology spin to it today. So with that, I'm going to thank everybody for coming out here today. Those of you who listened in, thank you for participating. We'll be sharing this going forward. And any last notes from everybody in the audience before we send off? Send off? Wow.
Oh, nice kickoff. Nice kickoff.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thanks very much.
Appreciate it. Have a nice Friday.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.